All right, I'll be quick. Good afternoon, everyone. Brendan O'Neill from Delaware. With me, of course, from our delegation, Justice Risley from our Supreme Court, Chief Judge Smalls from our Court of Common Pleas, our Administrative Office of the Court person had to leave early. Amy had a family issue to attend to, nothing urgent but important enough that she had to leave last night. So we're here, and it's really appropriate that we're back here in Washington, D.C., because, especially for Justice Risley and Judge Smalls, because a long time ago, they both came down to D.C. together when they were just starting out. They were looking for a job, each of them. And together, they went down to FBI headquarters to interview for jobs as special agents. So they made appointments. They came in, and they got to the FBI headquarters, and J. Edgar Hoover was the director. He had a receptionist out front. And they said, "Oh, glad to see you, fellas. The director's going to speak with you individually. And first we'll speak with Hank Ridgely." So then Hank Ridgely, now Justice Ridgely, he went in for the interview, and the director, J. Edgar Hoover, says, "Hank, you know, it looks pretty good here. You went to Syracuse University where you got your undergraduate degree. You're a graduate of Catholic University Law School right here, and then you got an LLM from Georgetown or George Washington Law School. You got what it takes in terms of credentials to be an FBI agent." He said, "So it looks pretty good, but I got to ask you a few questions first." And he says, "Well, I'm ready." So J. Edgar Hoover says, "Hank, who was the first president of the United States?" And he thinks for a second. He said, "Why, that was George Washington." He said, "Very good." Then he says, "Hank, which president freed the slaves?" And then Hank thinks for a second. He said, "Why, that was Abraham Lincoln." And he said, "Hank, who murdered Abraham Lincoln?" And Hank knew the answer. I mean, everyone knows the answer. But for a moment, it slipped his mind. He said, "Mr. Director, I'm sorry. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I just can't come up with it at the moment." He said, "Well, why don't you go outside and work on it, and I'll talk to Alex, who's waiting in the lobby." So Alex is sitting in the lobby. Hank walks out, and Alex says, "I can't believe you're here so soon. What happened?" He goes, "It's unbelievable. He asked me 3 questions. Already he's got me working on his big murder case." So lucky for Delaware, they didn't get the job. So now we have a Supreme Court justice and the Chief Justice, the Chief Judge of our Court of Common Pleas. So lucky for us in Delaware, they didn't become FBI agents, and they came back to Delaware and went to work. So it's good to be back. And before getting on to our plan for what we're doing going forward, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's made this possible. Both Cynthia and Alma, it's been a great event in terms of your organization, your help for us, and also, I think importantly, you created a very good working environment where it's very collegial, it's very relaxed, and you enabled us to get down and get to work without, acting all ABA important and official. It made a very good, and comfortable working environment. I think, our group, we feel like we got a lot done, and that's in large part to the help that you've provided us. And in Delaware, we're really a small state. We're probably, in population, smaller than any of the other jurisdictions represented here. And when Julius was speaking yesterday, he thought it was important that all of us get to know who our state administering agency is and who the person is we go to secure federal funding. Well, I can tell you our experience in Delaware is kind of different. Our SAA, State Administering Agent, is on our task force. And everybody, we have fewer than 900,000 people in the state. So we're all in this together, which, occasionally can be a little constraining and a little bit of a pain in the neck. But for the most part, in terms of ease of working, we have everybody who's a stakeholder in the system at the table in our task force already. So that makes it much more convenient and much more conducive to getting things done. And with that in mind, I'll give you an idea of what we are going to try to do. And really, our reform is to address violations of probation and try to address the racial disparity and the rate at which people of color are going into custody following a finding of a violation of probation. And as you heard from Justice Risley yesterday, we have a 4% differential on a gross number, and then we have a relative race index of 1.16. We want to get that number down to 1.0 even, which basically would be a race-neutral decision-making process. That's what our goal is. And what we've been spending time doing the last couple days, particularly yesterday afternoon and then this morning, is, all right, what can we do to get to that goal? And we came into it with a plan of trying to get, a non-biased policy for sentencing people following a finding of violation of probation. And, what we came up with was, well, let's try to get a system where there's something different than what we're doing now, but we're not sure what. And fortunately, Cynthia and Selma arranged for us to meet with the Washington, D.C. version of what we call our probation department. And it's CSOSA is what the acronym is. It's Community Supervision Office, they call it here. We call it our probation department. And we learn from them what they do, and they have a system of graduated sanctions that is really intended, and it appears to us from what they showed us, works to impose a standardized system across the jurisdiction for how they handle people who violated the probation and what they do to them. And it's built on a basis of the first and most important thing is the risk assessment of the person when he enters into probation. So the key is to get a valid risk assessment tool, evaluate that person taking into account the crime he's going to go on probation for, the conduct that led to that crime, his previous history on probation, all the stuff that goes into, assessing whether this guy or this woman is going to be a good risk, a bad risk, or can't really figure it out. And then look at all the range of potential sanctions, from just calling into the person for, hey, you got to come in and talk, I got to counsel you, to putting them back up in jail, or everything in between. And so what they've done is they created a computer program that when you do the risk assessment, you implement that, and depending what crime he's convicted of, and the length of his probation, and the level of his probation, they have a range of sanctions that translates. They create essentially a grid that gives the probation officer a range of sanctions for each particular violation by each individual probation officer. So it kind of gives everybody in the system, the probation officer, the defense lawyer, and the judge, more information about how to handle a person who's found in violation. And the way it works here in D.C. is, and we essentially want to mimic what they've done because it looks very good to us, is Joe Smith's the defendant, he checks into probation, they do a risk assessment, that gets a value, that's input to the system with all the other information, and then Joe Smith, shows up twice at the probation office on schedule, third time doesn't show. Well then, when he doesn't show, that probation officer can refer to that program and say, what is a sanction that should be imposed for Joe Smith when on his third potential or scheduled probation office visit didn't come into court, or didn't come in and come to the meeting. And it'll give him 3 or 4 options, and he has a range to choose from. And that, according to the D.C. people, has been effective in getting the probation department people to buy into it. Because you're not really tying their hands. What you're doing is giving them more tools to do their job with, giving them an opportunity to do something that they may otherwise have not come to their, they wouldn't have thought of. And sometimes, they may not want to do something that's listed in those options. And they can get a harsher sanction or even a lesser sanction if they go to the supervisor and get approval. They say, we want to go off the charts. We want to go and do something different for someone that really is not called for in our program. And to go outside that, what's required is the supervisor has to sign off on it. So we look at this, yesterday when they showed it to us and say, hey, we're done. We just got to steal their computer program, plug it in, and we're going to give it a shot. And it's a little more than that, and Cynthia will certainly vouch to that. But that's essentially what we're doing. We're going to try to copy their program, and I think we're calling it as not, instead of calling it copying, let's refer to it, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to be efficient. We're going to borrow from their best practices and try to implement that practice in our jurisdiction. And, we've gone through the chart and done all the scheduled out stuff, and, that's sort of the details I'm not going to talk about here.
Do you have a name?
We have 2 choices, and not surprisingly, I had a suggestion that was not agreed to by the court. I can tell you, I can tell you as a public defender, I've had this experience many times before. Notwithstanding that little joke, I did not take it personally. So, So yeah, the two names are, in instance, I'll ask you to pick which one you think was mine and which one you think was there. We'll leave it to you guys. All right, here's one of them. It's Probation Supervision Enhancement Initiative. That's one. And the other one I have here is Graduated Sanctions for Probation Violations. Graduated sanctions for probation violations, or, huh? Well, all right, who thinks that the Probation Supervision Enhancement Initiative was by the judges? All right. Who likes graduated sanctions for probation violations? Come on. Hey! So, and among the things we're going to ask for,
Yours actually sounds more prosecutorial than the first one. The first one sounds a little bit more neutral, you know. Which
Second one's in the sanctions.
yeah, the section one's into sanctions. Yeah.
well, I'm just trying to call it what I think it is. That's the part. I'm not trying to spin it. I'm just trying to name it. Sugarcoat. Yeah. So, you know, what we're going to look for in terms of technical assistance is some consulting services to, one, help us write and develop the risk assessment, which really drives the whole, it kind of defines the universe of the sanctions available to a probation officer and or court or in any given probation violation context. Also, some assistance in making the whole program, writing the whole program, so when they come in after the risk assessment, that risk assessment, when plugged into the system, gives the potential available sanctions to each, for each violator if there's a violation, and also some assistance to write a program for really being able to better measure the racial impact and see if there is a disparity now and does it change after we implement this program. So essentially that's what we have, and you know, I know Gail did a great job. I felt like I was watching Law and Order when she was up here talking about the cops, and I'm sending that cop out the door, he's not coming in here, but it was a great presentation, and
you were thinking, ten.
So I'm happy to answer any questions. I think I've covered the bases.
Yeah.
Okay. Got to pass them on that one, huh?